Yeah, let me just cue it on my end. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Alrighty. So
All
first
right.
off, what is it that inspired you to become a musician?
What inspired me to become a musician? Oh, well, um, funny enough, my parents, actually, my whole family, no one in my family is a musician. My
Same.
dad was, yeah, yeah, my dad was a hobbyist bass player. I guess you could say he was a musician, but everybody else in my family went on to be like businessmen and doctors and all these other things. But there was always music playing in the house. Always. There was like never a time where there wasn't music. So I grew up with just listening and listening and listening constantly. And I followed the same path as like a lot of drummers where we picked up pots and pans and played with spoons on the kitchen floor and everything.
Yep.
Um,
Uh,
and I think a lot of it was just sort of internal and just your DNA and what we're made of, and also definitely the surroundings and that sort of thing. I really didn't know that I was really, planning on being a musician as much. It was just I was just showing, what I was made of, and my parents were like, "Hey, he has some sort of connection to music, and he's listening a lot." And I started playing piano first before I started playing drums, and I did it without lessons. I was doing everything by ear, so it was just sort of like a step process of things just happening, if that makes sense.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What challenges have you faced in becoming a successful professional musician?
What challenges have I not faced? um, Many. I mean, many, 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 many. Um, I mean, there's so many changes in the music business.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's always been a tough business. But I'm of a generation that was somewhere. I'm 50, so
Okay.
my generation is the generation that did stuff old school, but had to learn stuff new school. And I think that's the hardest thing for me is having to like even like my daughter is teaching me stuff about Instagram, you know, and about how to like get my brand better and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I didn't understand. I had to learn that, but at this time I came up recording to 2-inch tape and doing old school television commercials and things like that in a studio where now I'm recording from home. So I mean, there are so many other challenges of being a musician, but I would say, at least from my generation standpoint, that's probably the biggest challenge is now balancing that, not having the full scope of only doing it old school and not having the full knowledge of doing it new school either.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
This
yeah.
world has become very modern. Social
And
media is a
very
big
quick.
part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and very quick. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. What was the coolest live gig you have ever done?
Oh, cool. Yeah, actually, I have. I had been the sub for Mike Portnoy, who played with the Neil Morris band, the progressive rock
Yeah.
Neil Morris band.
Mike Portnoy,
And
sure.
yeah, and Neil is my Paul McCartney. I mean, he's I think like the greatest songwriter of all time, and I got to play with him, and I was so honored. And one of the gigs we played was in Kiru, Finland, which is in the center of Finland. And we played the gig, and more people showed up that we thought. There was like 10,000 people under a tent, which was amazing.
Sick.
But on top of that, we were in the middle of the summer, so if you ever go up to the northern hemisphere, they call it the white nights, where the sun doesn't set.
Mm.
And if it sets, it's basically a sunset all night. It doesn't go down. There's no darkness.
Yeah.
So we played our gig. Amazing, 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 amazing show. And then we were in a lakeside sauna all night, going in and out of the sauna, out of the lake at 2 in the morning. And there was this gorgeous sunset over the lake the whole time. And it was like being in a fairy tale land. It was
Yeah, it's
unbelievable.
unique.
It was
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Uh, how was it working on Broadway?
Um, Great. I love working on Broadway. I'm not like overly a Broadway guy or a show guy. I mean, there's
Sure.
guys that I know in the New York scene that are like their main gig is Broadway, and that's what they do. And
Mhm.
they're sort of on the ground floor with a lot of shows coming out, and they get the
Yeah.
chair and that sort of thing. They're part producers and stuff. I might want to get to that point, but I'm a little bit more selective with the shows that I play. Like I said, I'm like not overly Broadway show kind of guy, but the shows that I've played have more kind of in my wheelhouse, like Rock of Ages.
Yeah.
I'm subbing on Little Shop of Horrors right now. I was on Kinky Boots. I
Yeah.
was doing a newer Latin show called Americano. And so I'm definitely a little bit more like a little picky about the type of music I want to play on
Yeah.
Broadway. Although over the years it's gotten a little bit less because the business has changed so much, and that's kind of a lot of where the
Yeah.
business is going. Broadway is a very difficult scene. You got to understand that in 1977 or so, if you were a drummer in New York City, you're talking about, if you're a valuable drummer, you're talking about the session guys, the guys that are doing records, the Steve Gads and the guys that were in the studio and going from studio to studio. That doesn't exist anymore.
No.
But what does exist is the top level players. Where do they fall down to? Well, they fall down to Broadway. So now when you're playing Broadway, you're talking about not guys that are just show guys, but A-list drummers. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of competition. You have to know a lot of things besides your normal knowledge of reading, show drumming, all that type of stuff. You have to know a lot about electronics and artificial intelligence and all that kind of stuff to be able
Yeah.
to pull off a really successful show. So I sub for Toriello over at Little Shop often, and the whole thing is on Ableton, and the drummer is the one that controls every Ableton trigger.
Yeah.
So during a show, you're reading, you're doing this, and you're hitting a pedal, and you go wrong, the show's off. So it's very
Sense.
competitive and very difficult these days. Very, very difficult. You got to be up. You got to be like 100% focused on every show that you're on. You lose your place, and and that's it. So
Yeah.
and Broadway's become like a real big hang, man. I mean, it's like there's no auditions. It's who you know. If a guy trusts you and knows you're a good player and a hard worker, they'll bring you on as a sub, and then maybe you'll make it to the chair at that point.
Sure.
But it's not one of those things where you go out and you run out and you're auditioning all day for Broadway. It doesn't happen that way. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, man.
Yeah. I know our
Yep.
good friend Juan Carlito Mendoza. He's been subbing on Lion King
Yep.
lately. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
It
And
seems like a good
Hamilton.
gig. He does it a lot. He's doing Hamilton too?
I think he's doing Hamilton. Maybe it's just Lion King. I could be
I
wrong
think
about
it's
that.
just
Actually, I
Lion
think
King.
it is just
Yeah.
Lion King. I
Yeah.
think it's just Lion King. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, he does it a lot, and I've never really I don't know much about Lion King. I never knew the guys. I knew Tommy Igoe, who was the chair for a
Right.
long
Sure.
time. I knew him
Tommy.
very well, but I never really promoted myself to him to sub that. And then I think Carter McLean took over. I believe
Yeah.
Carter's the drummer now.
Carter's been
And I
the
know,
main guy for a while, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't really know. I mean, I just these shows are hard because you want to kind of sub a lot of shows, but at the same time, if you don't know the guy, it's hard to just go up to them and just say, "Hey, man, I'm this and I do that." It's like you got to kind of like work slowly, and it's all about,
Absolutely.
like everything in the business, about forming relationships.
Yeah.
Really,
Networking. Sure.
networking.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk about your career as an educator?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, this could be a long a long answer, so I'll
Oh,
keep it as short as I can. But
it's all good. Don't
um,
worry.
education's always been really important to me. I was not the most wonderful student growing up, but over a period of time, I started to get a lot more serious, especially as I got into my career and got into my major in
Yep.
school and everything. And going back to my parents, I talk about this quite a bit in interviews that because my parents were not musicians, I knew growing up that I wasn't going to have anybody that really would help me in the business. I wasn't going to step into a gig. I didn't know people. My parents' friends were not musicians. So I had to do what it took to be as well rounded as I possibly could. And one of the things that I made a point in doing right off the bat was to make sure to go to school and to get degrees. And when I look back and I realize the stuff that I'm doing now, maybe some of that path could have changed a little bit. Like maybe I could have studied with more guys that were direct to what I'm doing, because I have 2 degrees in classical percussion,
Wow.
not drum set.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a minor in jazz and drum set, and then a master's in classical percussion. So I knew I was going in an area that maybe wouldn't be my career, but I also knew it would be something that I'd be able to have for the rest of my life. And by the time I turned 23, I had a master's degree, which I never go back, for music again, which is great. I had that set for the rest of my life. So education became not only just a part of what I believed would be the best way to learn this instrument from a historic perspective and a knowledgeable perspective, but also from a job security type of situation of, hey, listen, I got to get really good at this too. I got to be able to teach really well too, and make relationships really well too, than just have chops, because we need to kind of open up a lot of different avenues to become successful in this business. So I I studied at the Drummers Collective during the time that I was getting my degrees. So I studied with, some amazing teachers and amazing professors and this, that, and the other thing. And I came out of school, and I was really well rounded. And then it helped me to teach, and then of course teaching helped me more experience of how to get better at teaching and so on and so forth. And one thing led to another, and now I've been, teaching for the last 30 years.
Great.
Um, and been part of the collective, Drummers Collective, for almost 17, and part of the New School and the University of Arts in Philadelphia and that sort of thing. And yeah, education will always be really important to me. I will say one other thing, and I don't know if it's so apropos for this interview, but it's a tough decision that as educators we're in right now, in that we're always going to promote education for what it is. I will always say that education is first. To promote the idea of going to schools and being 150 to $200,000 in debt as a musician when they come out is something that is becoming harder and harder for me to say, hey, go do, you know. So I always feel like a degree is really important. I'm staring at my degrees on the wall right now as I'm looking at you, but I think a lot of that has to come into play of how worthy a scholarship is, how hard a student is working before college, um, how I'm the teacher and the student are putting into the studies before they get there, and the correct decisions to be made for the right schools and the right path, so you don't come out and have to pay back money for the rest of your life. It's a tough thing as an educator right now.
Certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And on the
yeah,
topic of degrees,
yeah.
uh, a degree isn't going to guarantee you work after college. You still
Correct,
got to know people.
correct, correct. That's excellent, and that's a great observation, Sam. Uh, Degrees, they've definitely benefited me in a variety of ways. I mean, obviously, the education part has benefited me greatly, and to be able to work in New York City, especially at a variety of trade schools and maybe even other colleges, it's important to get certified. And I was able to get certified as a teacher from my degrees. So that's a very important perk to that. As a modern drum set player, I don't know if the degrees hold the same weight. And that's a little bit more of where the marketing aspect comes into play, of not just being a good drummer, but being able to market yourself really well and know a lot of people. I've been talking about to a lot of younger students, such as yourself, that is like New York is like um, it's like an amusement park, okay, where I'm making a metaphor to reference this, but
Yeah.
you have to be a good drummer to work in New York. It doesn't mean you're going to get gigs. It means that's your kind of ticket into the amusement park. You know what I mean? If you're a good drummer, yes, you could work. If you're not a good drummer, you're not going to work in New York, right? So a lot of people are like, "Hey, I have all these chops and I have all this and all that." Okay, great, that's great. Now you could work, but now the work actually begins. Then what do you do from there? You know what I mean? And then that becomes a waiting in line type of game. The New York scene is very, very much a waiting in line and not cut the line kind of thing. And when you get up to the front of the line and you prove yourself, that's when you start getting the work. But in the meantime, you're waiting behind a lot of guys. And a lot of those guys might not be fantastic or as good as you, but you still have to wait. So a lot of it is about like really understanding the steps involved of how to get work and how to use education and your degrees and that type of thing to your advantage without really stepping on people, because you start stepping on people and then you start losing work, you start losing
Yeah.
jobs. So you got to do things the right way. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, it's a
yeah,
good lesson.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, we're still on the topic of education, kind
Okay.
of. So, what is your teaching philosophy?
um I'm not sure if I have an overall philosophy. um I think that students have to understand that education is the route to to continually allow our instrument to progress.
Mhm.
Okay, but simultaneously, there is a balance, and this is where I got caught up a little bit. There is a balance with the street smarts of the business too, and the area of the business where teaching and degrees are not a part of your life. You know what I mean? And I had to learn that balance. That took a while. Um, I might be straying off topic here because that's a little bit of a different thing than what you asked me. But part of my philosophy is understanding how, if you're getting all this education and you're doing it the right way, and you're learning all about this instrument, there has to be a balance of what people outside the walls of the educational facilities want as well. Okay. But that being said, for me, education and teaching is all about respecting who did it before and how you're going to take what they did and continue to progress our instrument. So
Mhm.
maybe that is my philosophy
Yeah,
without, without writing it down.
yeah.
That's kind of
Stu-
what I think.
Studying the greats, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's more than just studying. It's respecting the greats.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
I see a lot of people that kind of trudge through the what's the word I'm thinking of? Like, they know the steps. They're told like a syllabus. Oh, we got to learn this and that and the other thing. Okay, yeah, they're studying the greats, but they're not really respecting, who developed this, where it came from, the history of behind, how funk started, how jazz started, where it started, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And there's so much to that, and understanding that we have a gift here. If you're going to be able to go jing jing ding 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 and play it on a gig and make some money off of it, that's a man. You got to know where that came from and why you're playing that. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
You
go ahead.
you wouldn't have Vinny without Tony Williams,
And you
and you
wouldn't have Tony
wouldn't Tony Williams without Max Roach.
without Roach, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
you know it.
And Max without Papa, and Papa without Baby Dodds, and that kind of
Baby
thing. Yeah.
Dodds, Big Sid
Yeah.
Catlett. Yeah,
It's it.
the
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
drumming for sure.
And then the New Orleans guys, marching the parades and stuff. So.
Yes, that was Baby Dodds, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, Baby was one of the first ones Baby and Chick were some of the first guys to sort of
right.
start to put it together and say, okay, this could be done here. Really, it was like, they started doing all this vaudeville stuff,
Yeah,
and it was a matter of taking all the stuff that was going on down there and putting it in a show
yeah,
circumstance. That's where the trap and the contraption set came about, and putting it all together and having one guy play that stuff,
right.
Yeah.
And then on the topic of New Orleans, you got guys like Zigaboo with the classic da 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 da,
Yep. Meters.
and
Yep.
that yeah, Sissy Strat, and
Yep.
now you got Stanton Moore doing it with
Yep.
Galactic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's amazing.
New Orleans is huge for music.
Well, it's
Yeah.
for those who want to study our instrument have to study the history of New Orleans,
Yes.
not New Orleans music, but
Mhm.
New Orleans itself, and how that was such an important port for all the people coming through there from the different islands and from the different, from Cuba and South America and of course Africa and that kind of thing. I mean, that was the door. You know what I mean? A lot of people are like, well, New Orleans music, New Orleans music. Yeah, that's true. But tell me a little bit about what the people of New Orleans were like and how they came from over here and came into our
Oh
country,
yeah.
and then the Mississippi River and how it came up and all that. That's just history, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Sure.
So,
The
yeah.
South. I feel like a lot of influential music has come from the South more than it's come from the North. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just how, you know, the history, excuse me, the history of our instrument is very interesting in that our instrument's only 100 years old. That is like baby.
Yeah.
In comparison to piano, in comparison to even just percussion and stuff, people banging on
The
things. which have been
drum
around
set
since
you're talking about,
caveman days.
not like
Drum
you're not
set.
drum set.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Right.
No,
Drum
it's accurate.
set is only
Yeah.
100 years old.
Yeah.
So like it's amazing what has happened in just 100 years of time,
Yeah.
and how you know, how like the industrial revolution and the job booms and everything and transportation bettering itself and all this kind of stuff moved everything from the south up to the north and out, and then how people kind of settled in these different areas and then created their own pockets of stuff, you know. I mean, it's all so interesting, and we could be here for days talking about
Yeah,
that, you know.
really.
um but it's important to know about New Orleans itself as history, and how that opened the door for everything to come through,
Certainly.
you know.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's that respect thing I was talking about before. It's like you have
sure.
to respect where things came from to feel good about playing
Yeah,
this instrument.
certainly. Yeah.
Great questions, by the way, man. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, man. I had fun
yeah.
putting these together. Doing these interviews are fun, man.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
What else?
All right. How do you think COVID has impacted the current music scene?
Ah, yeah. Well, look where I am right now. I'd
Yeah.
be doing the interview with you in person.
Well, I mean,
um,
no, I mean that's there's something to be said too because I mean, now we know more that like all this virtual connection stuff
sure, sure. Yeah,
exists. So
sure.
it's not like I mean I'm in Boston at Berklee and you're back in Jersey.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like people knew what Zoom was before COVID, but COVID really, really like made people aware what Zoom was.
Yeah, before we started recording, you and I were talking, and then I was saying that I had done a variety of online teaching before
Yes.
COVID, but it wasn't until COVID hit that I really started to. In general, one of the things that COVID did for me was it got me more in touch with what I can do from my home studio in
Mm-hmm.
regards to, of course, teaching online, even just like the setup, the lighting, and all that kind of cool stuff and everything, to recording at home, learning more about Logic and what I record on, getting better mics and stuff, doing research on stuff like that. So I'm predominantly doing everything from home base. I just did a session for Corey Glover, the lead singer of Living
Yeah, I
Color.
saw that
Yeah,
on Facebook. Yeah,
yeah,
that must have been a
great. And
blast.
I did it. Oh, it was awesome. I did it right here, and I
Yeah,
recently caught a sing for the band Candlebox, and I did it right here. These are things that I never would have done, you know, uh, uh, in real life situation. Now, if I get asked to do a big record in a studio, yes, of course I'm going to go there. That's, but a lot of things in that respect have changed. So COVID has definitely brought us all more in touch with home studio stuff and what we're doing at home, which I think makes things slightly a little bit more dangerous in regard to the fact that now everybody could do what people like. There was a time where, like, if you're Steve Gadd, you're vetted. You're vetted to be Steve Gadd, which gives you the permission to get on a session, which gives you permission to go to like Electric Ladyland Studios and record the major record there. Now, as you know, everybody and their mother has a YouTube channel and is doing all this great stuff from home, and there's no vetting going on. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And there's people teaching, and there's people teaching really bad stuff. So and there's a lot of free material out there that's not so good. So there's kind of a good and a bad side to what has happened, and this is even before COVID, arguably enough. But there's a lot of good and bad stuff to like how the online thing, and then of course what COVID has done to further us in the online thing,
yeah,
what it's done in regards to like the validity of our instrument and our business, because it's really hard to vet people. I mean, I'm finding myself even now with all the credentials I have saying to people online, yeah, look me up. You'll see that I'm not a phony, that kind of thing,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
hard because, you got to like vet yourself.
True. True.
Tricky. For me, COVID, one of the things that COVID did for me is that it's I'm a lot more spread out now. Whereas before it could have been a little bit by choice, and I'm not really sure, but like, with the collective and my schedule at the schools, I was very like regimented. I was like in the schools 4 to 5 days a week. I
Sure.
had my gigs. I would fly out some weekends for gigs and stuff. Now I'm a lot more scattered. Like, I'm doing all different types of gigs. I got 2 Broadway shows here. I got a fly out date here. I got 5 online lessons there. I mean, I was always doing scattered stuff, but it's much more so now. And the quality of the work now I'm doing, actually, I'm a little less busy right now, but the quality of the work is better. And I'm not sure
Yeah.
why, but that's what COVID did for me. That's how it like kind of pivoted,
Yeah, man.
you
Well, I
know?
mean, you could
So
enjoy it a
we'll
lot
see.
more too, because you couldn't really work 100% like you used to over the pandemic, like, and now post-pandemic, you realize how good you had it, and you can't be taking
Yeah.
it for granted anymore. You know?
It's a really good point. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
great point. Yeah. There were times, actually, it just happened sort of like at the end of last year. There were times where I wasn't enjoying working because I'm actually too busy.
Yeah.
Or the pandemic, I understand, was like the opposite. It's like nobody was in person, so you weren't really enjoying it.
Really. Yeah.
I was working during the pandemic. I had jobs, and I can explain that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that,
Please do.
yeah. But what ended up happening
Yeah.
at the end of the year last year, like when everything opened up, is I think it happened to a lot of people. Is that it's like the waters started rushing in. So all of a sudden, my
Yeah.
calendar was so booked that I kept saying every week, I don't know how I'm going to get this done. I don't know how I'm going to get this done. I don't know how's this going to happen, and I really kind of overworked myself. So
Wouldn't
now
that be a good problem to have though, because of not having anything for a while?
sometimes,
Yeah.
um, life is about balance. And you're younger than me, obviously, and you'll find when you get married and have a family and have a house that you have to find that balance, you
Oh yeah.
know. And I think if you have an understanding wife like me, like I do, and you have a tour, for instance, and you're busy on tour, even if you're away from home, I think they understand that a little bit because that's your job. That's the one thing that you're doing. When you're dealing with a calendar that's so busy that you can't cut stuff out, so you're coming home every night at 1 in the morning and you're exhausted and you can't do stuff around the house, that's a different type of commitment. And that goes over the line of, hey, this is good work. Now it's distracting.
Yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
may have to
I just saw that.
upgrade here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
see it. Yeah, yeah, I just saw that. We got we could go as long as you want, but I don't. You want to
Yeah.
restart or something, or
Yeah. I'm probably gonna restart so I don't have to pay this money. It makes you fall for it, you know?
oh yeah, I understand. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you
We
send me
cancel.
another link? Yeah. You can save this, right, and then just combine the two interviews or something like that.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna do that. Uh,
Yeah. So
let me
when you
just
get off of
cancel this one.
this, yeah,
Yeah.
just when you stop the recording now.
Yeah.